Vanessa fixed her hair in the side mirror of a car parked outside their house and didn't even notice she was holding her breath. He was standing at the gate, tall, in a simple light-colored shirt, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, clearly nervous about meeting someone's parents, fidgeting with his collar. She recognized him instantly, even though he wasn't looking her way. Ryan. The same Ryan she'd known casually through mutual friends for about 2 years. They'd crossed paths at get-togethers, at somebody's birthday parties, once even stood together for half an hour at an outdoor summer concert, complaining about the bad sound system. She used to dress up a little nicer for the events where he might show up. She used to remember his jokes just to repeat them to her friends later, like they were her own. He was always polite to her. He smiled, texted back, laughed at her jokes. And always just polite. Never once, not for a single second, more than that. Vanessa? He recognized her too, genuine, unclouded surprise in his voice. What a coincidence! I was just... He glanced quickly, a little nervously, at the house behind her. I'm heading in to meet the Bennetts, meeting my girlfriend's parents. A little nervous, honestly. Her smile froze on her face half a second too long. Girlfriend? She repeated, and her voice came out even. Too even, like she was surprised herself at how well she managed not to give anything away. Claire, he said, with that particular warm tone people use when they say the name of someone they'd do anything for. He couldn't hold back a smile just saying it out loud. We're getting married in 6 months. I still can't believe my luck. And you must be... Her sister, Vanessa forced out, feeling the ground go strangely unsteady under her feet. The younger one. He didn't notice a thing, just nodded, shook her hand goodbye a little warmer than you'd shake an ordinary acquaintance's, and walked toward the door, getting ready to make a good impression on his future in-laws. Vanessa stood by the car for several long minutes, watching the front door of her parents' house close behind him. The door behind which, at that very moment, her own sister was presumably bustling around happily, getting ready to introduce their parents to the man Vanessa had been quietly, hopelessly in love with for 2 years. Something inside her cracked quietly but permanently in that instant. Not with a bang, but with that barely audible click that's usually how the longest, most destructive fractures actually begin. 3 years later, she'll send her family a single text on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. The realtor will explain the rest. And to understand how one chance meeting at a gate turned into a years-long quiet war inside a family, we have to go back to where it all did. Claire Bennett met Ryan Crosby at a mutual friend's birthday party when she was 24. It was one of those loud, slightly chaotic gatherings where half the guests barely know each other, and the other half have already forgotten whose birthday it even is. Claire was standing by the snack table, eyeing a suspiciously bright-colored cake, when a voice next to her said, I wouldn't risk it if I were you. Word is the birthday guy's aunt made it, and her reputation in the kitchen is, let's just say legendary, and not in a good way. She turned and saw a tall guy with messy dark hair, holding a plastic cup like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Thanks for the warning, Claire smirked. So what do you recommend instead? Honestly, I haven't found anything edible here yet, but I think I found an interesting conversation. He made her laugh with a dumb joke about badly made coffee a few minutes later. She fired back something sharp enough that he laughed for a solid 5 minutes, head tipped back, and from that night on, they were inseparable. They exchanged numbers before leaving. He sent her a dumb cupcake meme the next day. They met for coffee a week later, and within a month, they couldn't imagine a weekend without each other. Ryan worked as an engineer at a small construction firm. Steady, reliable, the kind of guy who never says something he doesn't mean and always follows through on exactly what he promised. Everyone who met him liked him instantly. Polite, attentive, not a trace of arrogance despite a solid position he'd landed pretty young. Claire's friends told her, unanimously, that she'd found a rare one. Their first 6 months together were almost blissfully uneventful. They tried new coffee shops on weekends, argued about whose taste in music was worse, cooked disastrous dinners from internet recipes, and laughed at their own culinary failures. Ryan turned out to be a creature of habit. Every Sunday morning he was up first, brewing coffee and bringing it to Claire in bed, even if they'd stayed up late the night before. At first, she was surprised by that kind of consistency. Later, she realized it was exactly the reliability she'd been missing in past relationships. What Claire didn't know, couldn't have known, was that long before her, Ryan had crossed paths several times with her younger sister Vanessa at those same friend group hangouts. Their social circles had overlapped even before Claire ever met Ryan herself. Vanessa was 2 years younger than her sister, bright, outgoing, used to being the center of attention at any party. But to Ryan, she'd always just been a pleasant acquaintance, one of dozens of faces in the same crowd, nothing standing out. Fun, quick-witted, pretty, but nothing more. He'd never once thought of her any other way, and certainly never suspected anyone might think of him any other way either. At one party, the two of them genuinely spent a whole evening talking about travel, and afterward, Vanessa spent 2 weeks rereading their texts, looking for some hidden meaning that was never there. Just a polite, interested conversation partner, nothing else. When, a year into dating, Ryan proposed, on the rooftop of their favorite cafe, with a sunset view, fumbling the ring box right before he got down on one knee, Claire was over the moon. She laughed and cried at the same time, while Ryan, red-faced from embarrassment over dropping the ring, kept repeating, "This wasn't the plan, I'm sorry, I ruined it," until she finally kissed him just to make him stop. She brought him to meet her parents, Frank and Diane Bennett, for the first time on a sunny Saturday, more nervous than she'd expected to be. She'd rehearsed in the car how she'd introduce him, which topics to steer clear of at the table, joking that her dad would ask about his salary within the first 5 minutes. It was right there, at the gate of her parents' house, while Claire was still inside helping her mother set the table, that Ryan ran into Vanessa, who was just leaving after a morning visit with her parents. Lunch that day went beautifully. Frank did, in fact, ask about the salary, but overall seemed satisfied with his future son-in-law's steadiness. Diane asked about his family, about his plans for the future, throwing approving glances at her daughter every so often. Vanessa wasn't at the lunch. She'd left before everyone even sat down, citing something urgent, even though she usually stuck around for family gatherings well into the evening without fail. The wedding took place 8 months later, bright, warm, held in the courtyard of a country restaurant strung with garlands and fresh flowers, with genuine tears of joy from Grandma Rose, Diane's mother, who'd adored Claire with a quiet, special love since childhood, and never stopped telling every guest what a wonderful person her granddaughter had grown up to be. At that wedding, Vanessa gave a flawless, touching toast about how happy she was to see her sister glowing like that, smiled in every photo, danced with the guests until well past midnight. No one, including Claire herself, fully absorbed in her own happiness, noticed how much effort that flawless smile had cost her younger sister, or how long she sat alone in her car in the parking lot afterward, before finding the strength to start the engine and drive home. The first year after the wedding passed remarkably peacefully. Claire and Ryan settled into their first apartment together, small but cozy, with windows facing a park, visiting her parents most weekends, helping out with projects at the family house, while Vanessa showed up at every family dinner just as cheerful and quick-witted as ever, as if nothing had happened, and nothing ever could. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, strange, seemingly harmless comments started slipping into Vanessa's conversations with their mother. "Mom, have you noticed Claire's been kind of distant lately?" Vanessa remarked one day over tea, idly stirring sugar into her cup. "I feel like she just takes us for granted now, only calls when she needs something." Diane raised her eyebrows, surprised, looking up from her knitting. "Oh, come on, sweetie. She's just busy with work and setting up a life with Ryan. That's normal for a young couple." "You're probably right," Vanessa agreed easily, as if she weren't pushing anything in particular, and immediately changed the subject, leaving the planted seed to smolder quietly in the silence. Comments like that kept coming, in different forms, with varying degrees of insistence, spread out over time so that no single one of them looked suspicious on its own. One time it was, Claire had gotten so full of herself since the wedding, like she doesn't need us anymore. Another time, she didn't even ask how I was doing when I was sick last week, even though Claire genuinely hadn't known her sister was sick because nobody had told her. Another time, offhand, almost casual, over Sunday lunch. I guess she thinks she's above the family now that she married an engineer with a good salary. Vanessa never lied crudely or obviously. That would have been too easy to catch. She skillfully wove grains of truth into a carefully spun web of insinuation and implication, so that no single conversation, taken out of context, looked like an outright accusation. Claire really had been busy with work. Claire really had occasionally forgotten to call back the same day. But gathered together, repeated month after month, these drops of poison gradually became something far bigger and far more corrosive than the sum of their individually innocent parts. Vanessa had another, subtler tactic too. She started finding reasons to stay longer with their parents, specifically when Claire couldn't be there. Helping her mom cook, driving with her dad to pick up hardware for the garage, sitting late over tea, talking about her job, her life, her plans. She was filling up the space and time that used to belong naturally to both sisters equally, gradually becoming, in her parents' eyes, the more present, more attentive, more their daughter, purely as a function of hours logged together, not any real difference in how much either daughter loved the family. Frank, less emotional but far more pragmatic than his wife, also started gradually buying into this narrative. Not because he blindly believed every word, but simply because he saw no particular reason to doubt his younger daughter, who seemed to be around more, called more often, seemed more interested in their lives than her older sister. Claire, meanwhile, noticed nothing. Why would she have? She kept calling her parents every week on Sundays, just like she had since she was a teenager, showed up for every major holiday she knew about, helped her mom in the garden all summer, brought Ryan over to fix the fence and a loose outlet in the kitchen. One night, getting ready for bed, she even mentioned it to Ryan. "I don't know. I feel like Mom's been a little distant with me on the phone lately. Did I say something wrong?" "Probably just tired," Ryan said, not thinking much of it. Everyone goes through phases like that. Claire nodded and tried to shake the thought, chalking it up to ordinary parental exhaustion or a bad mood, never once suspecting the deeper cause that was, in fact, already spreading methodically in the shadows. Slowly, that barely noticeable chill built up, layer by layer, into an actual wall. At first, Claire was simply forgotten for the less important family get-togethers, a distant cousin's birthday across town, a neighbor's retirement party. She'd find out about these after the fact, from stray photos on social media, and just shrug it off. Probably an oversight. These things happen to everyone. Then the list expanded to bigger events. She wasn't invited to her parents' 30th wedding anniversary. This time the excuse was that it's a really small thing this year, just the closest family, nothing to read into. Claire even had a gift delivered by courier that year, genuinely wishing them a happy anniversary, with no idea the rest of the immediate family was sitting around the same table without her at that very moment. The following year, she wasn't invited to Easter. Supposedly the date had unexpectedly shifted because of Frank's work schedule, though, as it would later turn out, it hadn't shifted at all. Claire spent that Easter with just Ryan, puzzled that her parents hadn't invited them like usual, telling herself they were probably just worn out from hosting big gatherings. Every time, Claire genuinely chalked it up to miscommunication, to everyone being busy, to her own overactive imagination. She even asked her mother directly once, after another missed family event. "Mom, I feel like we've been seeing less of each other lately. Is everything okay?" "Of course everything's okay, honey," Diane answered without missing a beat. "Everyone's just got a packed schedule right now. You know how it is." Claire believed her, genuinely, refusing until the very last possible moment to entertain the idea that her own family could be deliberately, knowingly cutting her out of their lives. And so she kept reaching for any other explanation rather than the one, true one. The truth came out by accident, in that same ridiculous, almost comically mundane way carefully hidden family lies so often come out, through a simple technical error. Vanessa was setting up a new group chat specifically to discuss the details of selling Grandma Rose's house. Rose had passed away 6 months earlier after a long illness. And in her hurry, without double-checking the contact list, she added Claire's old, rarely used number to the chat instead of their Uncle Mark's number, the person she'd actually meant to invite to discuss the estate. For a few days, Claire had no idea anything was off, getting odd notifications from an unfamiliar group chat and reading the messages at first out of simple confusion. Who were all these people, and what was this even about? And then, unable to look away as the picture unfolding in front of her made her hands go cold. Her parents and Vanessa were discussing the sale of their grandmother's house openly, matter-of-factly, like it was already a long-settled question that had never required her input at all. They talked about realtors, estimated value, timelines, how to split the proceeds 3 ways. And right there, among the other logistical messages, was a short line from Vanessa to their mother. About Christmas. Let's tell Claire we're going to Frank's family out of state this year. Let's just not have her come this time. I don't want her showing up and asking a bunch of questions about the house at the table again. Diane replied a couple of minutes later with a short, "Okay, good idea. Easier for everyone that way." Claire read those 2 short messages over 10 times, sitting motionless in her own kitchen, before the full weight of what she was reading truly landed. 3 years of strange, unexplained distance suddenly clicked into one clear, painfully sharp picture. She scrolled the chat history further back and realized this seemingly harmless chat had already existed for weeks, and she'd been reading it blind that whole time with 0 context. She sat there like that late into the night until Ryan came home from work and found her frozen in the same position, phone shaking in her hands. "Claire, what happened?" He dropped down beside her immediately, alarmed by how pale she looked. She silently handed him the phone, unable to say it out loud. Claire didn't work up the nerve to talk to anyone about it right away. Even with Ryan, who'd learned the truth alongside her that same night, she could barely speak for a few days, trying to process it on her own first. For several sleepless nights, she quietly scrolled back through the chat as far as the saved history would go. And with every message she read, the picture got clearer and more painful. Piece by piece, she saw how Vanessa had spent nearly 3 years methodically, patiently, shaping a distorted image of her older sister in their parents' minds. Not through outright, easily disprovable lies, but through the steady, painstaking twisting of the most ordinary, unremarkable facts. Claire had once forgotten to call her uncle on his birthday because of a last-minute work trip, and in the chat, that quietly became, "Claire clearly doesn't care about family anymore. She's got other priorities now. Work matters more to her than any of us." Claire had once, honestly and without any hidden agenda, said she couldn't lend a large sum of money for their parents' bathroom renovation because she was saving for a down payment on a mortgage herself. And that became, "Claire's gotten so selfish, only thinks about herself and her husband now, like the rest of us don't even exist to her anymore." Claire had missed one ordinary family dinner because of a high fever, and that too became another piece of evidence in Vanessa's growing case. More excuses. Honestly, I think she just doesn't want to see us anymore. She'll use any reason not to. None of these individual claims were, technically, outright lies. Each one rested on a real fact, ripped mercilessly out of context. But stacked together, repeated with unnerving regularity, month after month, year after year, they gave Frank, and especially Diane, a persistent, worried, almost maternal sense that their older daughter really was drifting away, really was changing for the worse. when in reality, Claire had stayed exactly the same person she'd always been, simply living her adult, independent, busy life, as was entirely normal for her age. Claire found even more calculated, more deliberate moves buried in the chat, too. 6 months before Grandma Rose died, back when she was already seriously ill, Vanessa had written to their mother. "You know, I visited Grandma yesterday, and she talked about Claire all evening. It really shows who actually cares about being there in hard times, and who just calls occasionally to check the box." Diane had replied sympathetically, taking the version of events entirely at face value, even though, in reality, Claire had been visiting their grandmother just as often as her sister during that period, just on different days Vanessa conveniently chose not to mention. The bitterest, most sobering discovery was a message from almost 2 years earlier that Claire found buried deep in the chat history. A short line Vanessa had written directly to their mother, unprompted, almost in passing. "Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Claire tries to claim the house entirely for herself after Grandma dies. She was always Grandma's favorite. You know that better than anyone." Diane had only responded with a flustered, "You're probably right. We should keep an eye on that," not even noticing how casually and carelessly she'd cast a shadow of suspicion over a daughter who, at that point, had no idea any deed even existed. That message would turn out to be the first seed of an idea that would later grow into something far more serious and far more destructive for the entire family. Ryan, reading all of it alongside Claire, was quiet for a long time before finally saying, "You know what's the scariest part? She probably never even admitted to herself what she was doing. Somewhere deep down, I bet she genuinely convinced herself she was protecting the family, not tearing it apart." Claire didn't answer. She just stared at her phone screen, where 3 years of someone else's carefully constructed lies about her own life had been sitting the whole time. What Vanessa didn't know, and what even Claire herself hadn't fully understood until shortly before her grandmother's death, was this. Grandma Rose, for all her outward softness, her quiet voice, her unwavering warmth toward everyone without exception, was a surprisingly sharp, observant woman, one who'd lived long enough, and through enough, to see far more than she ever let on. Over the years, she'd noticed things the rest of the family had persistently failed or preferred not to notice. A faint chill in the way Diane sometimes talked about her older daughter in ordinary conversation. Strange, seemingly offhand comments from Vanessa at the family table, repeating with an unhealthy, telling regularity. Grandma Rose used to say that you couldn't tell real love from real fakery by someone's words. You had to watch how they acted when they thought no one was grading them. And she'd watched Vanessa in exactly those unguarded moments, over a cup of tea in the kitchen, when nobody was performing for anyone. 2 years before her own death, during one of Claire's regular Saturday visits, Grandma Rose, without any prior explanation or warning, asked her granddaughter to drive her into town on what she claimed were errands, but actually took her to see an old acquaintance, a notary she'd worked with since she was young, long before her own grandchildren were born. And that same day, had a deed drawn up making Claire the official, full co-owner of her house, with an even 50% stake. "This isn't because I love you more than the others, sweetheart," she told Claire very seriously, gripping her hand tightly right there in the notary's waiting room. "I've lived long enough on this earth to see exactly where things are quietly heading in this family. I want you to have something solid under your feet, no matter what happens after I'm gone. Don't tell anyone about this yet. Let it be our little secret, okay?" Claire was genuinely stunned, tried to protest. "Grandma, you don't need to do this. You've got Vanessa too. And Mom and Dad, there are other ways to split things up." But Grandma Rose just shook her head with that calm certainty that left no room for argument. "I know exactly what I'm doing, sweetheart. Just trust me." Claire didn't think much more about it at the time, chalking it up to the touching, slightly odd, but ultimately understandable concern of an older woman looking out for her granddaughter's future. She tucked the paperwork into the back of a desk drawer and nearly forgot it existed for months. Right up until that winter night when she stumbled onto someone else's family group chat and suddenly remembered it with a new, unsettling clarity. Grandma Rose died a year and a half after that visit to the notary, peacefully, in her sleep, in her favorite armchair by the window. Claire grieved just as genuinely as the rest of the family, and certainly wasn't thinking about the house or any paperwork at the time, only about how much she'd miss those quiet Saturday chats over tea. Exactly 1 week after Claire stumbled onto the fateful family chat, an email marked, "Urgent, please look at this today," landed in her work inbox from her father. A hefty packet of legal documents, supposedly essential for finalizing and closing out the estate matters concerning Grandma Rose's house. In the cover note, Frank had written in his usual reserved tone, "Claire, hi. The notary drew up the paperwork on Grandma's house to wrap things up. Just needs a signature and to be sent back, purely a formality. We've all already signed on our end, just need your part." Claire, already on high alert after what she'd read in the chat, didn't sign the papers blind, the way she was clearly expected to. Instead, she carefully reviewed the entire packet alongside a lawyer friend from college, a woman named Mia, who now had a successful practice in family and estate law. Mia laid the papers out on her desk and started reading through them methodically, page by page, jotting notes in the margins as she went. The language in the documents had been drafted cleverly, deliberately vague and convoluted. Buried among perfectly standard-looking clauses about distribution of the estate was a single line waiving Claire's rights to any share of the house in favor of the remaining rightful heirs, carefully disguised as a routine technical step to simplify and expedite the probate process. Mia read it twice, let out an irritated whistle, and set the papers down. "Claire, right here," she pointed to a paragraph near the bottom of page 3. "This is basically you giving up any claim to the house entirely. Whoever drafted this was clearly counting on you signing it without reading closely, trusting your family. Classic move. Honestly, kind of a clumsy one. Bury the important stuff under a pile of formalities and don't put it up front where it'd get noticed. Tuck it near the end where people's attention has already faded." "So someone deliberately wrote this so I wouldn't catch it?" Claire asked, though she already knew the answer. "That's exactly what it looks like," Mia nodded. "And it's competently done, so whoever wrote it wasn't an amateur. Any idea who might be behind this?" Claire thought of Grandma Rose's deed, still sitting untouched in the back of her desk drawer, and slowly nodded. "I think I might have something more useful than a guess." She sat there staring at the document for a few more long seconds, feeling something inside her go finally, permanently cold. Not so much from shock as from the last, bitter, almost expected confirmation of what she'd already started to suspect, but had still, against everything, hoped she was wrong about. Claire didn't call her parents screaming or throwing accusations. She didn't fire off an angry, exposing message into that same family group chat nobody had ever bothered to remove her from. For a few days, she even kept acting normal, calling her mother on schedule, chatting calmly about the weather and work, giving no hint that she now knew far more than anyone realized. Ryan was amazed by her composure. "How can you talk to them so calmly, knowing all this?" he asked one evening, watching Claire hang up after a routine Sunday call with her mother. "Because yelling won't change anything," she answered, tired but firm. "Paperwork and facts will change everything." After letting one quiet evening pass to think it all through carefully with Mia, she made 3 short, businesslike, perfectly calm phone calls. The first call, to her lawyer, formally requesting that her status as full legal co-owner of the house be confirmed and registered, based on the deed Grandma Rose had drawn up 2 years earlier. Mia took on the case, requesting a certified copy of all the paperwork from the notary. The second call, to the realtor, who, it turned out, was already handling the sale of the house on her parents' behalf, politely and without any drama, informing her of a second legal owner who had never given consent to the sale. The realtor, a woman named Patricia, was clearly stunned by the news. "Are you 100% sure about this? My file lists the owners as just Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, along with their younger daughter." "I have a notarized deed in hand," Claire said calmly. "I can send you a copy right now if you'd like." The third call, to the same notary who still held the original deed, to confirm, once and for all, that the document remained fully legally sound and couldn't be challenged after the fact. The elderly notary, who remembered Grandma Rose's visit in vivid detail, assured Claire the document had been drawn up flawlessly and was fully protected against any attempt to contest it. The realtor, upon learning of the situation, immediately put the nearly finished sale on hold that same day. From a strictly legal standpoint, selling the house without the co-owner's written consent was simply not possible, no matter how many forged or half-true or deliberately confusing documents had already made the rounds within the family. Claire deliberately told her parents and sister absolutely nothing about any of it. She simply, calmly, without another word, waited, feeling, for the first time in a long while, not panic or hurt, but a strange, almost peaceful sense of control over her own fate. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered at her parents' house as usual, without Claire, of course, who had once again, just like the year before, been thoughtfully given a fake holiday date. The table was set festively, and the mood was upbeat, almost triumphant. The house sale was expected to close any day. The proceeds were already being mentally divided 3 ways on paper, and Vanessa, meanwhile, was already seriously eyeing a bigger, nicer apartment for her share, scrolling through listings on her phone between courses. "Look at this one. It's got a balcony," Vanessa said enthusiastically, swiping through the listings app. "The second the money from the house comes through, I'm putting down a deposit." Diane smiled, pleased that at least one of her daughters was there, sharing this special evening with them. It was exactly at that moment, in the middle of a lively family dinner, over clinking glasses and Christmas music playing from a speaker in the kitchen, that a short, blunt text from Claire appeared in the group chat. "Merry Christmas. The realtor will explain the rest." At first, nobody at the table understood what it meant. Frank chuckled, assuming it was some kind of odd joke. Vanessa frowned, reaching automatically for her phone to reread the message. But within minutes, Frank's phone rang insistently. On the other end was the clearly rattled voice of Patricia, the realtor, stammering out an explanation that the sale had been completely blocked due to formal, documented claims from a second legal owner of the property, and that no further sale could proceed without resolving the issue. "A second owner?" Frank repeated, still not understanding. "What second owner? The house belongs to me and my wife, and Vanessa—" He trailed off mid-sentence, listening to the realtor's explanation, his face slowly going pale. A heavy, ringing silence fell over the table. Diane slowly, as if in a dream, set down her fork and turned to her younger daughter. "You told me all the paperwork was handled, that Claire had already signed away her share." Vanessa visibly went white, opened her mouth, but couldn't find a single word to say. The phone in her hand, still open to that photo of the apartment with the balcony, suddenly felt out of place, an almost absurd reminder of plans that had just collapsed in a single instant. The truth came out faster and more completely than anyone at that table could have imagined that night. Mia, Claire's lawyer, formally notified the entire family in writing the very next day about the existence of Grandma Rose's deed, about the attempt to slip Claire forged, misleading documents, and, while thoroughly combing through the correspondence to build an official complaint over the fake paperwork, happened to come across the old messages forwarded to Diane from that same family chat. The ones Vanessa had been methodically writing to their mother for nearly 3 years, including that fateful Christmas message added by accident. Diane, receiving the packet of documents, read them aloud in a shaking, breaking voice, right there at home in front of the whole gathered family, seeing for the first time, without any illusions left, what had actually been happening all along. Not some natural, gradual drifting apart of her older daughter, as she'd been led to believe for years, but a carefully planned, methodical campaign by the younger one, starting on that distant day Vanessa first learned the name of her sister's fiancé at their parents' front gate. "Tell me this isn't true," Diane said quietly, looking across the kitchen table at her younger daughter. "Tell me you didn't." Vanessa was silent for a long time, staring at the floor, and then broke down crying. Messy, gasping sobs, dropping for the first time in 3 years the mask she'd worn for so long. "I didn't mean for it to turn into this," she finally said, choking on her words. "It's just, I knew Ryan before she did. I really thought he liked me, genuinely believed it. And then it turned out he never saw me that way, not once. And he came to meet you all as her fiancé. I couldn't handle it. And the happier she got, the more unbearable it was for me to watch." The family conversation that followed, a few agonizing days later, with Claire finally present, was long, painful, and honest. For the first time in 3 years, without a single thing left unsaid. Faced with facts she could no longer deny, Vanessa finally, completely admitted to what she'd been quietly carrying since that very first encounter by the car. A slow, corrosive jealousy she'd never managed to outgrow or even admit to herself, and a constant, exhausting fear that the truth about her real feelings would one day shatter the carefully built image of the good, loving younger daughter. Claire listened to the confession in silence, stone-faced, but without her earlier fury, only a deep, worn-out exhaustion. "You could have just told me," she said finally. "Back at the beginning. I would have understood. It would have hurt, but I would have understood. Instead, you spent 3 years destroying what was left of my family." Vanessa had no answer for that. The house was, in the end, still sold, but honestly this time, transparently, in full compliance with the law, with the proceeds split equally between the 2 legal owners, exactly as Grandma Rose had quietly intended all along, having foreseen, long before any of this happened, exactly where uncontrolled, quiet jealousy inside a family could lead. Frank and Diane, reeling from the truth, spent more than one sleepless night trying to understand how they'd managed to miss something so obvious for 3 straight years, how they'd let one dearly loved child methodically turn them against the other. Diane later, alone with Claire over tea at the very kitchen table where the whole quiet campaign of lies had first taken root, said softly, "I'm ashamed I believed it so easily. You didn't deserve any of what we let happen to you all these years." Claire didn't pretend everything was instantly forgiven and forgotten. Too much pain had built up over 3 years, too many Christmases and Easters she'd spent shut out of her own family. But she was willing to rebuild, step by step, on one non-negotiable condition. "I'm willing to start over," she told her mother, "but only if it's built on honesty. No more half-truths, no more, 'we decided not to tell you so you wouldn't get upset.' If something's wrong, say it to my face, not behind my back." Things with Vanessa took much longer, much harder work to rebuild. They didn't become close sisters again overnight. The wound ran too deep for that. But over time, after Vanessa committed, entirely on her own, without any family pressure, to real therapy, the 2 of them managed at least a calm, civil relationship at family gatherings, without the old poison hiding behind every sentence. Claire didn't seek revenge and didn't demand a public apology for show, though she'd have been entirely justified in wanting one. She simply, calmly, but firmly drew a clear line for the future. Any relationship with her family going forward would have to be built on complete honesty, not years of quietly playing along with a comfortable lie for everyone else's sake. A few months after the dust had fully settled, Claire and Ryan hosted a small dinner at their place, inviting the whole family together for the first time. Frank, Diane, and even Vanessa, without the kind of tension in the air that would have seemed unthinkable not long before. At the table, pouring tea after dinner, Diane suddenly asked, looking at her daughter with an unfamiliar softness, "How did you even manage to stay so calm through all of it? I think I would have fallen apart, made a scene the very first day." Claire thought for a second, remembering that winter night she'd first read the messages in someone else's chat, and Grandma Rose's wise words to her at the notary's office 2 years before. "Grandma once told me she wasn't protecting the house," she said quietly. "I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. I get it now. The truth finds a way out eventually, one way or another. Sometimes all it takes is a little patience, and a good lawyer." She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, that smile was completely free, without a single shadow of old resentment left in it. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Claire stood in the kitchen next to Ryan, drying dishes, thinking back to that far-away sunny day she'd first brought him to meet her parents, with no idea what was happening at that very moment out by the gate. A meeting that, without either of them knowing it, had set off a chain of events that would stretch on for 3 years. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how sometimes the quietest cracks turn out to be the most dangerous ones," she answered. "And about how Grandma knew exactly what she was doing, leaving me that house. She wasn't really protecting the house itself. She was protecting the truth. She just knew ahead of time that one day the truth would need protecting." If this story kept you hooked till the very end, hit subscribe. There are plenty more stories just like this one waiting for you every single week.